Hi, everyone. Welcome to Kibana for Business Analytics webinar. Thanks for joining. My name is Alona Nadler. I'm a product manager for Kibana. I have also Yoav Dresden, which is a director of product management in our cloud business. And before we're going to start, I wanted to share with you a little bit of our agenda today. So we're going to start with a quick introduction, a very quick stack overview. And then we're going to dive in, and Yoav will share with us how we use Elastic and specifically Kibana also for the business analytics for our own company. And the second half of this webinar will be around an e-commerce demo and some tips and tricks that are commonly being asked when users are using us for the business analytics use case. So for those of you who are not that familiar with Elastic, Elastic is a full stack. We have multiple products, but in the core of Elastic is the Elasticsearch, which is the heart of Elastic Stack. Elasticsearch is a distributed RESTful search and analytic engine. It lets you unify and correlate your metric data, log data, or any other structured, unstructured that you might be using. On the bottom, we'll have the ingest. And we have two awesome products that allows you to ingest data into the Elastic Stack. One is Bits on the left side. Bits is a lightweight data shipper that you can install on the edge. And on the right side, we have Logstash, which will allow you to augment and enhance your document at scale. And it's more of an ETL pipeline, a central ETL pipeline that also processes your data. Now, on the top here is Kibana, which is the UI for the Elastic Stack. It allows you to visualize and manage your entire stack. Kibana started as a way to visualize data coming from Elasticsearch, and over the past few years, it grew, and we added more stack management capabilities and our solutions. In general, you're welcome to consume the Elastic Stack in many different ways. We offer our own self-managed, so it means that you can go download the Elastic Stack and use all our products. We also have our managed service offering, which is called Elastic SaaS Cloud. It allows you to use us, and we'll kind of do the heavy lifting, and you can just consume our stack and manage it. We support multiple platforms. And with that, we're going to move to Yoav that will share business analytics in Elastic.
Thank you, Alona. So if you can go to the next slide. So Alona asked me to talk a little bit about how we use business analytics in Elastic. My responsibility is Elastic Cloud, which allows to manage Elastic, to use Elastic as a managed service. And I want to start with a little bit, just one slide on why was there a need for business analytics. It's pretty obvious, but just to kind of like state where we were about a year and a half ago and where we got now and how we're using it. So the advantage of working in Elastic is that you can spin up any cluster of any reasonable size anytime. So naturally, we have a lot of data silos that keep a lot of product information, whether that's business information stored and synced from Salesforce or Marketo, whether that's infrastructure information from the cloud backend that holds the state of the clusters, etc. There's a lot of logging that we do for different operational reasons, etc. And about a year and a half ago, we were in a position where we had a lot of data that you can basically pretty much ask any question, but getting to this data in a way that allows to ask business questions like, which gold customers with a version X that run on this region have a capacity of this and that and experience out of memory events in the last 30 days was a pretty hard question, because you had to go and use cluster UUIDs and account IDs, etc., in different data repositories in a way that made it very cumbersome to ask these kind of business questions. Another issue was that if you want to track how key metrics that you have change over time, it's pretty tricky, because logs gets deleted, rightfully so. You don't need all that verbosity to be maintained for such a long time. And that was another issue. plus the ability to, besides have dashboards, be able to ask ad hoc queries of particular questions. This was an important goal for us. So if you go to the next slide, just a very high level kind of like overview of what we built together. We put together what we call a KPI cluster, not a very inspiring name, but nevertheless a real workhorse for us. And that puts together information from multiple repositories, mainly the cloud backend and the billing backend system that provide most of the information about our customers, but also information from Salesforce and from Marketo that are funneled through our BigQuery Elastic BI, going into that KPI cluster and processed in a way that basically blends it into two key indices that I'll talk a little bit about later on. The way that we consume this is primarily in four ways. There's a big set of dashboards that we track, and I'll give some examples in the next slide of which what do we use these dashboards for and what kind of business questions we can ask using them. We're using machine learning. I'll cover just a little bit of that as well. This is the time series analysis for anomaly detection using the Kibana machine learning. We also use it for ad hoc exploration, just going to discover or doing ad hoc visualizations. We've set up multiple spaces within the recent version of Kibana so that different stakeholders can go and create their own spaces or their own visualizations within their permissioned space. And we've also done some Slack and Salesforce notification integration where we feed information that is time sensitive or that needs to be published to other people that don't go into these dashboards through Slack and through Salesforce. So these are some examples of the business questions that we can ask or how we get this kind of information. I'll talk a little bit about how we're using them and what we can gather from this. So starting with growth here on the bottom left, we track the overall growth of our customers, both in terms of customer count, in terms of their overall capacity, and in terms of the spend, the MRR spend that they have. This is a pretty high level overview that blends a lot of things that are happening at any given time, but it gives us a good picture of where we stand in terms of the month-over-month or week-over-week growth that we track. The trial funnel, for example, is a nice way to look at our typical go-to-market using bottom-up, where users can sign up for a free trial of Elastic for 14 days. And we track the sign-up rates over every week and sometimes every day. We track the trial starts when people actually launch their clusters. We track the engagement of the users by loading data into the cluster, and we track the conversion rate of these. And we're also using annotations within TSVB or time series visual builder in order to mark particular events like webinars or other types of workshops, etc., that allow us to correlate the trial funnel to particular events and learn more from that. Another example, which I think is really powerful, is what we call Customer 360, which is basically a dashboard that is filtered for a single user, and that gives us a lot of interesting information about what is the user, what features are being used, how did the capacity change over time, what are the CPU and disk utilizations, how many shards and how these change over time, how many documents are loaded, and what kind of beats they're using or other types of feature. This is super helpful and been used by our CSMs and field people when they talk to the customer, because it can inform them of recent changes or the general state of the customer and basically help have a better conversation about what are the needs, etc. Retention and churn is pretty obvious. We track the level of retention of our customers and also can correlate it to particular events that may happen generally in the platform or specific to the customer. And then the last two examples here, which are more for operational needs and for statistics for product managers such as myself, is statistics about our cloud providers, what's the breakdown between the cloud providers, what's the usage and the fill rates on particular regions, and how to basically operate efficiently and have plans for expansion to additional regions and within the regions that we have. And deployment stats or cluster stats is basically the distribution of the different versions that our customers are using across Elastic. This is very helpful in tracking end of life process to see how many customers have this version or the other version, and see how that morphs and changes over time. Moving on to the next slide, an example of how we use machine learning. We basically create views of the particular indices that we have, and based on these views, we can learn a lot of things, whether it's business related. For example, show me the customers that increased their capacity with a certain percentage over time, and identify these customers. It's not always easy to track the changes in capacity that happen, and sometimes there's some noise where customers may be spinning up or spinning down some capacity. So machine learning definitely helps identify the big movers in that perspective, and that could be a good opportunity to offer maybe a move from a monthly plan to an annual plan that can have a discount based on a committed spend. Or in terms of there's a reduced capacity, this could indicate that there might be a risk here or some issues that we may want to have our CSMs reach out to the customer. More from the operational side, we're also using this to identify whether there's missing data within our cluster KPI. Now, this is not to confuse this with a fully operational system for observability or to basically track the health of our infrastructure. There are other systems and other clusters and supporting systems for our operations, for our cloud ops, to basically do this. But we are using this also to identify whether there's particular gaps in the information that we're getting into this business oriented cluster that we have here. Very recently, we started looking into, and we're planning to also use this for capacity forecast, because we do have the scale of the regions in terms of capacity over time. And we're going to be using machine learning to also forecast the capacity that we need, and that helps inform us of any instance reservation that we may want to do with the cloud providers in order to save cost over time and to roll that cost as part of our price to the customers. This is an example of a Slack notification or a Slack channel that we have for alerting on churns. Whenever customers are deactivating their customers, we get a notification with some digest information on what was the last spend, and this could provide an opportunity for our CSMs to talk to the customer and see if there's anything we can do, or at least learn what was the reason for it, and try to do better in the future if we messed up, and that's the reason for the churn. We're also working on creating additional channels that would flag different kind of important events, whether it's something for premium customers that gives us some notification on a movement that is significant there, and other types of channels. We're also working on integrating this with Salesforce, which is our system for that serves the field and is better used for a communication between the different stakeholders that can actually take action on that. And the last slide that I have before I hand it over to Alona. Alona asked me to provide the example and to talk a little bit about what were our design considerations in the indices that we created to track this. So I want to spend maybe a minute or two just to explain how we're doing these things. Obviously, there's different ways that this can be done. I just want to explain what we did and see if that's helpful for anyone. So we have two main entities. We have accounts and we have deployments, or also known as clusters. Accounts, basically, the account index holds general account information. Every new account that is being opened, whether it's a trial or an actual customer, gets an account document or account record. It tracks, if it's a trial, it tracks it's marked as a trial. It has information about the tier that the customer is in, general information about the spend and overall capacity. as well as the type of payments and other general information about the customer. Deployments and accounts is actually being synced every day. So every day we update this information. Deployments get updated every hour. And here we have much more detailed information about the actual infrastructure that the customer is using, which clusters, what the type of clusters, what kind of template, whether it's a hot warm template for logging use cases, or a high I/O or a high CPU, etc. What we need to do in order to ask questions such as, give me all the gold customers that are on Google Cloud Platform with a version of 6.3 and up, is we need to actually denormalize the account data into the deployment. So basically, that's part of what the KPI processor is doing, which is putting most of the fields that we have in accounts into the deployments on an hourly basis, so we can use the deployment index in order to look at the data. The cardinality is still per deployment per hour, but we are getting the data for the accounts as well. And the way that we've created the index pattern in this case is we actually created several aliases. There's aliases for accounts and for deployments that constantly get pointed to the last index that is currently running. Either that's a daily index or either that's the daily index of deployment that is updated every hour. And whenever we want to create a dashboard or run some search against what is happening right now, like how many trials do I have at this given moment, that would be typically hitting the index pattern of accounts that correlates to the alias that points to the latest snapshot of information that we have. But if we want to show how many trials did we have at any given time over the last 3 months, we would go to account all, that basically points to the multiple indices that gets tracked over time, and that can give us that type of information. So I'm happy to take any questions in the chat, and with that, I'll pass it over to Alona.
Thanks, Yoav. I had the chance to kind of watch how this initiative evolves in the past year and a half, and it was actually a great lesson internally, because we saw how many people start using the data in roles that usually are not that data savvy, like inside sales and a lot of the business development teams that are kind of using that to learn and to understand what their users need and to get more insight out of that. The last point that you have demonstrate is sort of a way that we use business analytics often, and how we set the indices in order to both have kind of the trend over time, but also get the latest KPIs. So with that, I'm going to move to the second part of the webinar, which is a demo and a live use case that is around the e-commerce. So what I did is that a while ago, a customer of ours gave us sample data. This is a very big e-commerce website, and we obviously removed all the sensitive events there and kind of created a more rich data set. And I wanted to show you a little bit how you can analyze and create business decisions out of that. In general, the second part of this webinar is going to be some tips and tricks. I kind of gathered the common questions and asks that I get from usually the business analytics users. We see more and more people that are using us for that goal. A lot of the times it's kind of start as a logging use case, and then when the business understand the value of the data, they start using Kibana and Elastic in general to drive business decisions. So this is our Elastic e-commerce demo. It generates data and it has products, it has a cart here. And now when I look at it from the other perspective internally from the data, I can see maybe this is a simple dashboard. It's live, all the events. Let's move that to now. All the events are driven by all the events are coming live into my Elasticsearch, and this is a simple dashboard that I have in Kibana. I report on the key metric, key reviews from customers in the tag cloud here. I have coordinates of my customers across the world, and where do I have more customers? It seems like France and Europe is pretty hot right now. I have my conversion rates, which is how many users actually converted and created an order. Average session time, which I calculate on the fly. The average order, which is currently on $152. And I can see the total revenue over time. And over here, I have the average scores. I get reviews between 1 to 5. And this just shows the average over time. So we can see some drops and a little bit of a spike. And over here, I have what it's called an abandon rate. So how many, or completion rate, how many people added a product into their cart, but actually finished the transaction, checked out, and paid and completed the order. The purple line is a moving average, which we're going to talk about, pipeline aggregations. And I have a static goal here, which my goal is to be a 65% completion rate. In general, what I'm going to do is we'll start with some basic stuff, and we'll add some more visualization into my dashboard. After that, I'm going to show how you can create calculated fields, which we called in Kibana scripted fields. And we're going to create a scripted field and create a visualization on top of that scripted field. And we're going to talk about pipeline aggregation, which are more advanced ways to calculate KPIs and create a more advanced calculations in general. And then we're going to talk how about sharing your findings with others. So we have various ways to share findings. Those can be in a report, it can be in a dashboard, and it can be also in a Canvas WordPad that I'm going to show you an example based off. So to get started, what I see that a lot of the times, especially when companies starting to use us as the business analytics, users are not necessarily that familiar with Kibana. And Kibana offers a really good interactivity with the data. You can create a dashboard with multiple visualization and really quickly filter through different events, brush a chart to zoom into a specific time frame, and just see the data from various perspectives, which a lot of the users find very helpful. Now, a lot of the times I see that people need a little bit more guidance into creating those filters. And what we've added in 6.2 is something that we call the input control. So I'm going to add an input control here. I'm going to click here, add a new visualization. We have the control here. Control is not strictly a chart type. It's more of a way to filter your data in a simple way. So I can create drop downs. I'll choose my filter, and let's say user event here. I'll call that event. That created a drop down that I can filter one or multiple values. I can decide if it's a single or multi-select. Let's add another one for maybe the category. Again, choosing my filter, my index pattern, and category. And I'll now have also the ability to kind of filter really quickly between the different categories of products that I have. And for numerical value, I'll add a range slider here. It will be the quantity. And that will allow me, once I'll add that to my dashboard, I can select a different range of quantity products, and that will filter the entire dashboard again. Something else that we can do using the input control is actually chain between different input controls. So I have the event here, and I have the category, and I can decide that the category is sort of chained to the event. So once I select an event, it will only show the relevant categories that I have. This is done through the parent control here. So I can decide that the category parent control is the event, which means that only when I select an event, I'll be able to see all the valid options of categories that I have for that type of event. And it's often being used when we look at, let's say, a region. So I have a country and a city. So I want, when I'll select France, I only want to have all the related France cities suggested to me, so I can filter something meaningful that makes sense. So now that I have like those input control, let's just save that. Control, and that will be added to my dashboard. It will be added in here in the bottom, and I can just take that on the top and just add that. As another way to interact with the data that sometimes is a little bit more familiar and convenient to people. So now that it's added, I can just say I want to see all the products that were added to the cart, and that has between, let's say, 2 and 4 products. Great suggestion. Okay, so between 0 to 4, I right now I haven't made any money, so it means that most of my orders are more than 4, and I can see where it's coming from in the world. And I can also quickly clear the filter and apply the changes, so I'm back in and seeing the revenue. Or I can say I want to see all my transactions here. And of course, my conversion rate immediately spikes to 100 because it's all different orders that I already have, and I can see the revenue and where it's coming from. So it's another way, a simple way to kind of filter through and look at your data in a simple way. Now I want to move to the next thing. Over here, I have the average score, and it shows me kind of what's the average review that people gave me over the past. It's based on an hour, and that's helpful. But in my e-commerce, what I consider as a good review is, let's say, 4 and 5, and whatever is equal or below 3 is, for me, it's not a good review. And I would like to know how it's trending between good reviews and bad reviews. And this is something that I don't have in the data, and I want to create a calculated field. So let's do, for example, that anytime that I get 4 or 5 I'll have a field that says 1, so I can summarize it later. And when I get 3 and below, it will be -1. So then I can visualize it in all sorts of ways. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to management, and scripted fields is tied to an index patterns. So I'm going to go to my index patterns, and here in my file bit, and I have here is my file bit, and I can add a scripted field here, and I can name the scripted field, so it will be review calculated. It's going to be a number, even though I can also make a scripted field to be a string, a date, a boolean. I don't need to, it's going to be I don't want to format it, even though I can. And now I can just add my script here. And the reason that we call a field is using this syntax. So this is the name of the field and that dot value, and then I can do all sorts of operation on top of that. So let me take my example here. I'm going to paste it here. And what I did is I took the review field, which is between 1 to 5, and I did an if clause. If it's below or equal 3, then return -1. Otherwise, return 1. And I'll just create my field here. And let's refresh my index. Perfect. So now I can go and create a new visualization. Let's make a vertical bar. And it will be based on my file bit. So I still want to look at it over time. So I'm going to add my timestamp. And it just shows me the number of events right now, but let's change it. So I want to see actually the sum of my review calculation, which is the field that I just created. And that just summarized between 1 and -1. So whatever is above 0 is good, and whatever is below 0, it means that in that particular 30 minutes was more bad reviews than good reviews. And I can make it an hourly as well in the intervals here. But let's see it in a more distinctive way. So I'm going to create a sub bucket, and I'm going to split the series. And let's use the filter. So the filter aggregation is really, really powerful for those who are not familiar. It allows me to create, to define what will be how will I split the series based on a query. So if the review is above 3, it's actually a recommended product. If the review is equal or below 3, it's not recommended. And let's see what happens. So now it's a very easy way to understand, like, and to compare the good reviews that I get versus the bad reviews that I get. Again, I created a field that is calculated on the fly. Let's move that to be green, and that's bad, so kind of add that. And now I can add that to my dashboard. It's a really easy way to compare kind of good values versus bad values and see how it trends over time. So it seems like, for example, here I had 462 good reviews versus minus 256 reviews. So it's kind of like a third of the good reviews, which looks pretty nice. I just add that. And let's add that to my dashboard. And add that. And now I can see kind of next to my reviews, I can see kind of how it trends, whether it's between good and bad, and it's all by a field that we calculated on the fly. So moving to a new topic of advanced calculation, often we, especially in the business analytics, we have some business logic that is not in the data itself that we need to apply on the data in order to get insights and kind of drive those decisions. For example, we might have now 4.2 conversion rate, but we have a goal to have that 5, or we calculate the conversion rate in a different way. And one of the most powerful things that Elasticsearch has and Kibana take advantage of is the pipeline aggregations. Just in general, pipeline aggregation are a way to create a more advanced calculation. It works on the output. When you use a pipeline aggregation, it works on the output that produced from a different aggregation. So let's say that I'll look in at the revenue, and on top of that, I'll create another calculation. So it pipes it. And there are many types of different pipeline aggregations, and each are computing different information from different aggregation. But those are really powerful tools to use, and especially powerful in the business analytics use case. And I'm going to show you an example. So over here, those are actually this conversion rate, this revenue trend, and even this abandon rate is using the pipeline aggregation. And let's just have a look at one of those. So I'm going to edit this visualization. Right now, I have a very simple revenue calculation over time. It shows me the sum of all my orders, and that's pretty nice. Now, there's something else that I can do with that and using on the same chart. So I'm going to add a new series, and I'm going to actually use filter ratio. So let's say that my e-commerce company now has started going into the kids category, and I want to know how much of all my orders or all my revenue is kind of driven by the kids category. So what I can do, I can use the filter ratio here, and I can say category is kids, and I have two different categories. I have kids shoes and kids clothing. So what I do, I'll just create a filter ratio that takes all the kids transactions and divided by all the transactions. What you can see here is the wildcard. So I'm taking only the kids and dividing it by all the different transactions that I have. And I can make that look as a percentage here and even create a separate axis to it. So it will be a little bit easier to read. So you can see that the right axis is now for the percentage, and the left one is for the revenue. And I can see them on one next to the other. If I want, I can also define that, for example, let's say that the axis max is is between 0 to 1, so it's a little bit easier to look at. And let's do something like this. So it's going to be a line. So the line represents the ratio of kind of the children's, let's do it between 0, the kids category in all my transaction, and I can see the revenue in the same place. So for example, in this particular day, I had $5,000 of revenue, from which 56% out of it was the kids category. And that's just a very easy way to kind of lay out a more advanced calculation on top of revenue. I want to show you something else. So that was the filter aggregation. Let me hide that for a second. And let's create another revenue like that. So I duplicated my series, and I want to show you something else. So right now I did some aggregation on my total price. And let's say that I want to know how it changed compared to the previous hour. So I'm going to use the derivative here. And the derivative is done on top of the sum of the total price. So let me change the color here so it will be easier to see. And okay, here it is. So what I see here is kind of the derivative of the revenue. So between this time and this time, the revenue actually dropped. We can see that in the blue area chart. And that's why it represents minus 1,863. It's compared to the previous hour. Now, that's pretty nice, and it helps me kind of understand exactly what's the delta between this time period and this time period. And I can see that on, let's change that to the, that will be the difference, the delta between those two time periods. Now, let's see what else we can do. A lot of the times we want to know what's the percentage difference. So between 4,000, 5,665 and 4,597. Like, I know it's minus $1,000, but I want to know rationally, like, what's the percentage change. And this is something that we can do using the bucket script aggregation. So in general, bucket script aggregation is another type of pipeline aggregation, and it's maybe the most flexible one because it allows you to create your own calculation. So you can calculate any KPI, anything that you want using the bucket script calculation, and it's extremely powerful. So what I'll do is that I'm going to use the sum of the revenue here and the derivative that I calculated, and I'm going to see the percentage change between the hours in my e-commerce website. So in bucket script aggregation, I can do, so I'll use now. It's a variable, and it's actually looking at the bucket of the total price. And I'll add another bucket for the difference, which will be the derivative. And now what I'm going to do, I can use my own calculation. And let's say that I want to calculate, to now minus an hour ago and see how it's divided by an hour ago to see whether it's increased in percentage or decreased. So I'm going to use the difference and divide it and that will be hour over hour. Let me add that it will be a percent. And actually I want that to be in a separate axis. So what you see now, when I'll take that to the top, I'm going to drag that, is you can see that the blue area chart represents the revenue, and the pink line represents the percentage increase or decrease compared to the last hour. So for example, over here, I have a minus 37% decrease between, is it 12 at night, midnight, and 11 p.m. And that's an easy way to kind of see a lot of the times you want to know how a specific metric is growing or decreasing. And it's a great way to put that in a normalized way in a percentage form. And you can do that, and you can change the formula based on how do you see that fit, just in terms of using a bucket script aggregation, and see year over year, month over month, week over week, just up to you based on your buckets. So check out the bucket script aggregation. It's extremely powerful. Now, let me save that. And I'm going to go back to my dashboard. So we created input control. We created this nice chart. We've seen how to create percentage ratio in Kibana. And we did an hour over hour increase, decrease, percentage growth using the bucket script aggregations. So what I want to do now is, now that we created a lot of those charts, you actually have your findings. You picked up on something interesting that you want to share. And there's like a few ways that you can share your findings in Kibana. So one of the ways is just to use our reporting. We have PDF reports. You can just generate a report and it will notify you. You can use our links and just share that with somebody else. So just copy the link, even take the short URL here, and just share it with somebody, send it in an email, and that will be directly referred to the dashboard. The other way, and it's relatively a new way, is that 6 months ago, we released a new product in Kibana that is called Canvas. And I wanted to show you what you can do with Canvas. So I'm just moving to the Canvas app. It's over here just below the dashboards. I'm going to set the refresh intervals. And I'm going to tell you in a few minutes, like what is Canvas, and we're going to do a live example. So Canvas is a brand new way to explore and visualize your data. And in the past, we had dashboards to analyze data, and dashboards are great if you want to interact with your data and you need filters and you want to apply different criteria on top of that. But sometimes you want to have something more customized and more visual to represent your data. And this is Canvas, and we see that as a great way to share your findings, whether it's in a report or whether it's through just hanging those and showcasing data across your organizations. And just to show you a few examples that some of our customers have done, this is an operational workpad. It's pretty much reports similar metrics to a dashboard, but it's a little bit more visual, and you can play with a lot of the infographics to make it a bit more clear to the people that are kind of need to read the data and understand what is it. So you can see a line chart. We have metrics here. We have the recent requests, so the recent machine or the recent geo. And this is a great way to kind of showcase data in a live way. And I wanted to create something for my e-commerce website that I can actually put in a large monitor in my organization, so everybody will see the latest and greatest of our business. So I'm going to create. If you are interested in Canvas, feel free. There is like a few dedicated webinars that shows you how you can get started with Canvas. It's a great solution. It really complements the dashboards, and it allows you to bring a great experience to your end users. So I wanted to create a brand new workpad just for my e-commerce website. So I can play a little bit with the graphics here. And let me add, I'm going to do something that I'm going to take similar to my website, and just place that on the top of my workpad here. And now I can start adding data elements. So for example, let's take the bar chart and see how many transactions I have. So in Canvas, I have all sorts of elements. Most of them are dynamic. And once I'm adding an element to my workpad, I'll customize it as much as I want, choose different colors. And then when I'm ready, I can connect the data into it. So right now it's showing mocks data. I can change the different colors here. I can decide whether I want to see the X's or Y. And now that I'm about to be ready, I can also go to my data and change and select the query that will attach to this element. Now in Canvas, I can choose 4 different ways. I can choose the timeline expression, which is expression-based querying, Elasticsearch. I have the demo data, which is what I have right now. I can use the Elasticsearch SQL, so querying via a SQL statement and showing, using something that is familiar in a lot of business analysts and kind of using that tool, or I can choose the Elasticsearch raw document. So let's play with the SQL. Let me just take. So over here, I can select, this one is just selecting star from a specific index pattern. Let me just replace it with something else. So I select a histogram. I want it to be in 10 minutes intervals. And then I do a count of all the different transactions where the event is a transaction, meaning an order. And I'm going to group by the hour and order by the hour. So as a preview, this is kind of the result that I'm going to get. So it's every hour, and then what's the number of transactions that I had. Now that I saved it, I can say, okay, so the x-axis is an hour, and the y-axis is actually the total. So now I can see kind of over time all the different transactions that I have in a visual way. And of course, whenever I refresh, it's just another query to Elasticsearch. So it will give me the latest state. That's nice. Let's add something else. I have this progress bar here. And let's say that I want to show the conversion rate. Again, in Canvas, there's like a lot of ways to customize the charts, which are pretty nice. I can choose the color. Let's say that the text is here. And now that I'm ready, I want to attach again the query behind it. So I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to move and use the SQL again. So I took all the transactions versus all the different events that I have and just divide the transaction with all the events. It's taken from my FileBit index. And now I want to report on the last ratio. So 4%, it pretty much what we've seen in the dashboard. Something else that is very powerful in Canvas is that I can also go into this expression editor and edit the expression directly. So let's say that I want to see not just I want to see the decimal point. It's actually a really important metric. I can just go format the number, add like decimal points, and you'll see that it changed and now shows me the decimal point. What you see here in general is everything this element is about. So you can see the query. So it's the select statement here. And then it's the progress field shape. And over here, you can see kind of the font, the colors, a little bit about the characteristics of the chart itself. Now, I can also change it to be, let's say, a gouge. Maybe it will actually make more sense in this example. So this is my conversion rate. I'll add a markdown that it will be easy to read. So the markdown is pretty similar to what we have in the Kibana dashboards with a lot more customization that you can do. Let me change the text color. And think about it in general, it's Canvas as a way to make the data more accessible. So this is my conversion. And I can actually duplicate that, and these are my transactions. Now let's add something else here. So let's say that I want to see all the events that customers have. So we define as an event if a customer is adding a product to their cart, if they started checkout, if they complete the order. All of those are specific events that we have. So let's see how it actually maps together. We'll create a sort of a panel here. So again, using the SQL, and what I'll do is I took the user event count them. So I get this table of the different users events and how many events were from each type. I then group by the user event, and I order by the count. So now it's ready, and I want this, the y-axis to be the count, and the x-axis to be the user event. And over here, I can also change the color of the text. So text settings, so it will be a little bit more easy to read. And I can see that 2,888 started checkout, and then maybe I'll change this to be a little bit lighter. Yeah. And then 1,000 of them moved and started to add to the cart. 700 started checkout, but only 600 completed the transaction, which might be an interesting information to understand where exactly is the gap. Is it by the people that started to check out the product, or is it the people that haven't completed the transaction? In one of them, there might be a problem that I want to investigate further. Let's say that I want to know how many people are currently in the website, and we have something that is taken from the infographic world, that is image repetition. And in image repetition, I can define what is the image, what is the empty image, and then how many images should I use. So let's say I want to use 10 and have 60, and now I can just add this image here. And the empty image will be actually similar, but just gray. And now I can just add as well a query into it. So I'm going to use this query. And again, what it will return is just all the transactions, number of people in my website currently. And I only want the last one. So I want to see kind of how it evolves over time. And maybe I'll increase that to be 13. And whenever it will refresh, I can see exactly how many people are using my service. Last but not least, let me just add a filter dropdown that, again, allows my user to interact with the data. So I'm going to take just this filter. It's a very simple query, and that will allow me to filter the data and give users and me a chance to interact and not just see it. So since we are a bit short in time, and now I can say, for example, I only want to see the transactions, and I'm going to see exactly what's the conversion rate, how many transactions are there, how has it evolved over time, and I can still filter back, and I can move to a full screen mode and just let my users interact with it in that sort of fashion. So a lot more driven by kind of visuals and letting people kind of understand what's in the data, how many people are in the service. I can, of course, style it a little bit more to make it really appealing. So let's add the latest thing. And I'll just gonna have that stretch across and create this nice visual that I can then schedule a report onto. So every Monday or every morning, I want it to be sent to all my users just by clicking here, create a report out of it, generate a PDF. And I can also use that with Watcher, so to schedule the report. So again, whether it's every Monday morning or conditional wise, every time the conversion rate is reached a certain point. So this is my report. So to cap up what we did here, often in business analytics, we want to be able to create fields on the fly, and we can use the scripted field. You can use the pipeline aggregation to create your own calculations, what fits your business and what makes sense. There are a lot of powerful tools in the pipeline aggregation. You can create ratio, you can create customized formulas. And then when you want to share your findings, you can send the URL to a peer, or you can even decide to use that on a display monitor and show everybody how it evolves over time and keeps it refreshed. So every 5 seconds, in my example, it will refresh and show kind of the latest and greatest. That was it. I'm going to move to the questions right now. But if anybody else have anything, I'll stay in the chat for a while. So thank you very much.